However you measure it, economic performance, political stability, internal security, the Pakistani state is failing its people. Why? And what prospect is there of radical reform from within? Well, my guest today would dearly like to be Pakistan's agent of change. For 15 years, former cricket star Imran Khan has led a reformist political party. He says his country has now reached a tipping point comparable to the Arab Spring. But are Pakistanis ready to put their faith in Imran Khan? Imran Khan, welcome to Hard Talk.
Thank you.
It is 15 years since you founded your party, Tehreek-e-Insaf. The greatest performance you ever had at the polls was to win one parliamentary seat, and yet you now say that the ideas represented by your party, their time has come. Why do you say that?
Well, that was 9 years back when we contested our last election. And the party was only 5 years old and obviously not equipped to contest the general elections. Now, 9 years down the line, it is a party which is now spreading faster than any other party in Pakistan. In fact, other parties are going down, Tehreek-e-Insaf is going up, and it is the first party of choice for the young in Pakistan. And all opinion polls are now saying this.
Yeah, I've had you before saying you shouldn't believe opinion polls because you say, of course, in the past, your poll performance was terrible. Why should we believe opinion polls now, particularly in a country like Pakistan, where they tend to overestimate the importance of the urban, the educated?
Opinion polls are an indication. I mean, it doesn't necessarily mean that you can translate them into success, but it is an indication of the popularity of the party. For instance, in 2008, the opinion polls did actually get things right. More or less, what they predicted, the sort of seat arrangement, is actually what happened. So there's no, if we can now get ourselves organized, we have the public support to convert this support into votes.
And yet that optimism works against the grain of your basic political message, which is that Pakistan, and this is a phrase you've used, is essentially run by a political mafia. You seem to believe that virtually every public office holder in Pakistan is a crook. So why should a temporary rise in the polls change that basic reality?
Well, let me just give you the statistics presented to the Supreme Court by the Election Commission, of course, on our petition. Out of the 80 million registered voters in Pakistan in 2008, 37 million voters were fraudulent, bogus, didn't exist. And this has been thrown out by the Supreme Court.
But aren't you making my point for me? If this is the system that you are trying to break into, and indeed bring down, it is going to take something extraordinary. Just believing that getting your message out to the Pakistani people and campaigning in the next election due in 2013, that isn't going to cut it, because the system doesn't allow people like you to win.
But, Stephen, this is exactly what I'm saying, why I'm optimistic. Because an independent Supreme Court has thrown out 45% of the registered vote, which was bogus. So, and they've asked the Election Commission to register another 35 million new voters, which were not registered before. Young voters are to be registered. 45% of the vote thrown out, so that's where the optimism lies. You actually might have the semblance of a free and fair election because the Supreme Court is independent.
Well, you have pointed to certain changes we've seen in the last few years. In 2007, for example, there was a huge political outcry after Musharraf, president at the time, fired the Chief Justice. There was a lawyers' movement in response. You took to the streets with many others. But I've been looking back at what actually happened, and at the time, for example, you mounted a hunger strike. You said that you would not take food or water until the Chief Justice was reinstated. The fact is, that hunger strike lasted all of a couple of days. There is a question about how far you're prepared to take your political movement.
Well, thank God it lasted only a couple of days, because without food and drink, I mean, you know, you can have a hunger strike without food, But I didn't realize without drink, you just go down very quickly. So thank God they let me out.
It wasn't good for your credibility, though, was it?
No, but listen, what was the hunger strike for? Because Musharraf had put the opposition in jail, put me in jail, lawyers in jail, other opposition under house arrest, leaders. And what he hoped was that he would just go through elections quickly and then come back again as president and have rigged the elections to get his party in. Now, the hunger strike was to really bring people back to the real thing, which was the Chief Justice. Because the election campaign would have made people forget the Chief Justice movement. But unfortunately, there was a counter-revolution. We were let down because the boycott, which is what we proposed until the Chief Justice was reinstated, sadly that boycott was broken by the main party which was leading us, PMLN.
Well, so let's not get too stuck on the detail. I suppose the point I'm making, and you raise it in this political memoir you've written, is that you now see parallels. The situation in Pakistan, you believe, is somewhat comparable to that in the Arab world, and that the Pakistani people, just like those of maybe Egypt or Syria, are prepared to take to the streets and take serious risks in their pursuit of political reform and change. I just wonder what your evidence is for the Pakistani people being in that place right now.
Stephen, I think Pakistan is ahead of the Middle East in terms of our democratic evolution. Our lawyers' movement was our Arab Spring, where actually people rose behind a Chief Justice but wanted exactly the same things as those people in the Middle East, the youth in the Middle East, which is democracy, representation, a representative government. It's exactly what we wanted.
But with all due respect, you know, we've talked about your hunger strike that lasted 2 days. In Damascus, we see people who day after day after day are prepared to go on the streets and brave the bullets with their passionate demand for political change. I don't see that equivalent in Pakistan today.
No, but Stephen, we actually got our objective, which was the Chief Justice. We got him reinstated. He was again kicked out. Again, we got him reinstated. And today, we probably are one of the only Muslim countries, or 2 or 3 Muslim countries, where the Supreme Court is genuinely independent. But this was our people's power. Now, of course, there was a counter-revolution, which is happening in the Middle East. We had the status quo come back. You know, the elections, they contested the elections, and so therefore they reimposed the same system and are trying to demolish the independent Supreme Court. But the people got him back, and it's an evolving process right now.
I mean, I suppose the question I'm driving at is how big a price are you, Imran Khan, prepared to pay in the coming months and years in pursuit of your desire for political change in your country?
Stephen, if you're in politics right now in Pakistan and you're a political leader, you have to be prepared to pay the ultimate price.
What do you mean by that?
In other words, your life is at risk. All the political leaders barely go out in public. I'm probably the only one who actually goes out in public because the society is so polarized right now. There's so much lawlessness in Pakistan. There is no rule of law. And as I said before, criminals are running the country. So therefore, you know, if you're in politics and going out in public and take an anti-status quo stand, you have to be prepared for the ultimate.
This brings me, in a way, to a rather personal reflection on your life. And you've opened yourself up to it because you've begun to write about it. That is, some of the personal decisions you've taken in the course of your post-cricket life and the way in which they've played into politics. One is, of course, your marriage to Jemima Goldsmith. When you look at the impact that marriage had, maybe not least on your political career, do you look back on it and think that it was a mistake?
It was never a mistake. I mean, I was never going to marry because of political reasons. I mean, I was going to marry someone who I wanted to live with. So if it didn't work out, yes, politics played a big part in it. Yes, it was a cross-culture marriage which needs more time than a normal marriage. But there's no question of regrets. You know, you try your best in the given circumstances. You take decisions in those particular circumstances at the time. Circumstances change, and there are a lot of variables at play, and things don't work out. But it doesn't mean that that's a mistake.
No, but it is a reflection upon you in a way. I mean, you married for love, you make that plain, but that love wasn't enough, was it?
in Britain, if everyone marries for love, and yet you have almost half of the marriages ending up in divorces, it's not because there's something wrong with the love or anything. It's that circumstances change. A lot of variables are at play to make a marriage work. One of them is that you must have the same passion. You must be growing in the same direction. Problem that happened with my marriage was the moment my opposition or the politicians attacked my ex-wife and attacked her at first Jewish lobby, then other various attacks.
Yeah, I mean, her father was of Jewish origin. She was from a fantastically wealthy family. You would have been very naive if you hadn't thought from the very get-go that those were going to be factors that would be played against her and against you once you were a married couple.
Well, no, I won't say naive. I just didn't expect in Pakistani politics. Very rarely are families brought into the fray. This is not normal in Pakistani politics. You do not talk about people's families. So this was yes, new for me. But it also happened because I was attacking their corruption. Because they could not attack me back on my corruption, which they do with each other. With each other, one says, so-and-so is corrupt. He says, you are also corrupt. And so they keep quiet. With me, they couldn't attack me on corruption, so they went for the soft target. And I must say, I didn't expect it. And it's unusual for Pakistani politics.
But here's the nub of it, and here's why I mention it in relation to you saying that, in politics in Pakistan, you have to be prepared to pay a massive price. You say now that the raising of your children is the most important thing in your life. And yet you had a choice to make, because when Jemima took the decision that such was the difficulty of her life in Pakistan, she was going to go back to London, return to London, you could have made the choice to go with her. Your relationship was still strong. You could have given up politics and given up your life in Pakistan, but you chose not to.
Stephen, number one, it's not just that my children are most important. They gave me the greatest happiness. Fatherhood gave me the greatest happiness. And the fact that once Jemima could not live in Pakistan anymore, wanted to come back. Leaving Pakistan was never a choice for me because, she married a certain man. Me, a man who was driven or always had passions, I think that's what made what I was, and that's what might have impressed her. Me living a purposeless existence in London would not have been the person Jemima would have married. I would have probably lost self-worth or a purpose of existence because I have not known a life without a passion from 9 onwards. Always I was driven by something. So what would I have done in London? And would that marriage have lasted anyway?
Do you ever regret that decision? Because it fundamentally changed your relationship with your children forever.
The only time, children are the collateral damage of a divorce, and probably they suffer the most. And of course, I mean, anyone who's been through a divorce knows the sort of pain that causes. But the important thing is that, when she went back, and the second election is really which took its toll on her. The first election, she actually campaigned with me. But because of her attacks in the first election, second election, we kept her out. So basically, for 5 months, she was on her own, and I was going all over the country. And by that time, I came back, and then they still attacked her. Even though she wasn't in the election, they called her something to do with a book she read about Salman Rushdie, that he was a teacher or something. And so they attacked her. And that's when, by the time I came back, I think that's when she had given up. So that's when she decided to go back. Now, what were the choices? I mean, I hoped that it would still work out, that somehow she would come back. But gradually, in a year or so, I realized that, she had just got settled in life there. And
that was your new reality, that you stayed in Pakistan, you committed yourself to politics, which brings us back to the political arena. Faith is very important to you, is it not? And it's important in your politics. You've made an increasingly prominent sort of set of statements about the way in which faith colours your political actions. In what way?
Well, I actually, in the book, I trace how I came towards faith and what faith means to me. They're two different things. Because what does faith, I mean, the whole point of religion and politics, Islam and Pakistan, The whole point of that book is to clear a lot of misconceptions. Either you're supposed to be secular or you're supposed to be religious. Either you're a westernized person who with Western values in our society, or you are one of the masses, or you're a fundamentalist. So I had to clear this. What does faith mean for me? If it wasn't for my belief in God, which happened much later in my life, I would not be in politics. Because fundamentally, how does it differ? How does faith change you? It changes you because a spiritual way of life means a selfless way of life. It means you have to, how much God gives you, you have a responsibility to the society. A materialistic way of life or a selfish way of life means look after yourself.
Well, I understand, you know, Islam is very important to you, but it does raise questions for any politician in Pakistan about what that means in terms of the vision they have for a future Pakistan. For example, we have seen in the recent past a number of politicians murdered inside Pakistan because they were prepared to make a stand for freedom, freedom of religion, freedom of belief. Thinking in particular of Salman Taseer, the governor of Punjab, who was gunned down because he expressed support for a woman who was in prison under the blasphemy laws. He wanted fundamental change in those laws. Did you support Salman Taseer's stand?
Probably the only politician who actually condemned the killing and actually more or less said the same thing as Salman Taseer. Do you know that even his own party members wouldn't...
Sorry to interrupt, but that you didn't. I mean, I looked and checked what you had said after he died, and you clearly condemned the murder, but this is what your own party website carried of your statement. You said, there is a sound reason for the blasphemy laws, and the real reason, you said, for the rising terrorism, of which Taseer's murder was a part, was actually the US-led war on terror.
Exactly. Blasphemy laws, for a start, were not made by Pakistan. They were at the time of the British. The reason for the blasphemy law was that when communities were living together, they did not want one side, one community abusing the sacred entities of another community, and there'd be a clash. That's when the blasphemy laws came in.
But you sound like you're justifying the blasphemy laws. You just told me that you were on the same side as Taseer. Taseer wanted the blasphemy laws totally changed. He wanted to end the death penalty as a punishment for blasphemy. He wanted the evidence base to be much stronger so that people couldn't just be taken to court on hearsay. He did not believe in these blasphemy laws. It sounds like you do.
Blasphemy laws are to prevent a community from having a bloodbath. It is to actually, if the laws are implemented properly, and now this is the thing, the statement which actually Salman Taseer said, the blasphemy laws should not be abused. So in other words, innocent people should not be caught in it. That's basically what he was trying to say, which is exactly what I said, that no one should be allowed to abuse blasphemy laws. Now, Stephen, understand this. Every law is abused in Pakistan. This is a small part of what is happening at a larger level.
It's a small part with symbolic significance.
No.
We don't want to spend too long on blasphemy.
One little point. It's not just Salman Taseer has been killed. There are imams in the mosques who've condemned suicide attacks have been killed. A religious scholar who I know, Javed Ghamdi, has to leave Pakistan to live in the US. And why is that in Malaysia? And why has that happened? Because the war on terror has polarized our society. The reason why I blame the war on terror is the same remark made by Salman Taseer would not even have made news before 2004. Today, the society has got so polarized, anyone caught on the other side, considered to be pro-American, anti-Islam, a collaborator, is at risk. And
when Salman Taseer is gunned down, surely the first onus upon a political figure such as yourself is to absolutely condemn the form of extreme Islam, the jihadi mentality, which led a man to pull a gun on Taseer and murder him.
Stephen, you go on our website. I mean, for 7 years, we have condemned every act of terrorism under whatever form of extremism. But my whole point is, this war is leading to radicalization of our society. It's not helping. It's not curtailing terrorism.
I just find it interesting.
It's producing extremists.
That in your sort of politicking, you have increasingly chosen to focus front and center on an anti-American message. It was there in the response to Salman Taseer. It was there when the killing of bin Laden was announced. Your first reaction, you said, was to feel anger and humiliation on the news that bin Laden was dead. Explain that
Stephen,
to me.
how would you feel if someone, your ally, comes from across the border and kills someone in your own country? And here you are giving immense sacrifices for that neighbor or for that country. Pakistan has lost 35,000 people dead, $70 billion lost to the economy.
But we're talking about Osama bin Laden. We're talking
hold on.
about the mastermind of the 9/11 attacks. Was it not, perhaps, a sense of shame that he was in Pakistan, and as the Americans went on to claim, almost inconceivable the Pakistanis did not know in some form that he was there? Maybe shame about that, but also a sense of relief that, thank God, he is no longer capable of leading Al-Qaeda and its terror activities.
Stephen, for one, whether Pakistan government was complicit or whether it was incompetent, as said by Panatta, I'm talking as a member of Pakistani public who's not part of the government.
Well, you're talking as a responsible leader in Pakistan, a man who aspires to actually lead the country.
Exactly. And now, how would I feel but I'm a Pakistani citizen, where my country has given 35,000 people dead in a war we had nothing to do with, $70 billion lost to the economy when total aid has been $20 billion. How would I feel that my ally, who we are fighting for, does not trust us, instead comes and conduct the operation itself?
How does it
help? Should they not have told our government? If it's either it's an ally or it's not an ally.
How does it help in terms of the future stability of Pakistan for you to tell the Americans that you want to see them completely out of your country in terms of intelligence cooperation, in terms of their anti-terror activities in Pakistan? You want to cut all ties, and you believe that will lead to greater stability, when the Americans are alleging right now that the ISI, the Pakistani intelligence agency, is actively helping the Haqqani network and other militants do their deeds inside Afghanistan?
First of all, if this myth being spun that 4,000 or 5,000 Haqqani Taliban is the reason why the US is not succeeding in Afghanistan. 140,000 US soldiers in Afghanistan, greatest military machine in history, is not succeeding because of these 4,000 or 5,000 fighters that are supposed to be holed up in North Waziristan. Does that make sense? That's number one. But I just come back to that.
Does America not have a right, in terms of self-defense, to pursue these people if the Pakistani government will not pursue them?
But are we Pakistanis not allowed to criticize American policy? Are slaves allowed to just say,
does the United States have a right of self-defense if these people are not going to be rounded up and detained by the Pakistani government? Does the US not have a right to do it?
But does the Pakistani government also have not any semblance of sovereignty in our country, that maybe they are fighting this war on terror, which is why 35,000 people have died? Can they not fight it their own way? Now,
their own way brings us back to the quote from David Cameron of last year. Consistently, the Pakistani has looked both ways, he said, on the issue of terrorism.
God, if I was the Prime Minister of Pakistan, I would have immediately told them that, look, we will fight this war our own way. We don't want any interference. We don't want your money. We don't want your aid. Look, it doesn't mean cutting the relationship with the Americans. It means we will fight it our own way.
Frankly, it does, because it takes two. And if you had your way, the Americans would cut their relationship with Pakistan. It's quite clear. And that would involve billions of dollars of aid at a time when Pakistan, goodness knows, has every reason to need that aid.
Pakistan has lost $70 billion, the people of Pakistan, in this war. This was published by our own. This current government has published in the economic survey. Total aid is $220 billion. This aid is destroying us. Look, I would tell the Americans that what do they want from Pakistan? There should be no terrorism from our soil. That's all they should want. We'll do it our way. If I am perceived as a puppet of the Americans, it takes away my credibility and ability to fight terrorism. Because of me, there will be more people picking up guns. Look, puppets create terrorists. They create radicals. If it was a sovereign government, we would deal it with our own way. But the Americans, surely, would they not want a Pakistan government which would ensure no terrorism from our soil? Would they not want that?
Imran Khan, we have to end there. Thank you for being on Hard Talk.
Thank you.
Hello again.